So in today's video, we are going to be looking at some southern toad morphs, and specifically this video is going to be highlighting the lightning bolt southern toad. It is one of the few pattern mutations, or I should say pattern morphs, that we know of that currently exist in southern toads. And I'm just going to go through and show you guys a couple different of the breeder southern toads that we have here. And I know that there aren't a ton of people that are like breeding southern toads right now, or certainly there's not very many people paying attention to the genetics. They are a very underrated species in my opinion. So I'm going to kind of go through, we're going to show you some normals, some kind of funky pattern southern toads, and kind of show you guys the evolution of how we go from a normal southern toad to a lightning bolt or a similar morph. So let's start out just showing you guys some normal southern toads so you can kind of get an idea of what the palette is that we're looking at. So here is just a big normal female. I've had her for probably a year and a half or something at this point. She's one of the longer term ones that I've had that has actually done very well. Sometimes you do lose the wild caughts to parasites and things like that, but this is kind of your standard southern toad look. As you can see, nothing fancy, but what I really want to draw your attention to is the pattern. So your average southern toad could be anything from a pitch black, I mean just glossy midnight black, all the way to a brown like an American toad, or in this case it's like a very almost green yellow kind of sandy color. So I'm not focusing as much on the color as the pattern. If we look on this toad, this female southern toad, we can see some cool head stamps, you can see some cool head markers with the patterning going through there, but when we look on the back, like you can see, most southern toads don't have that, they don't have a lot of contrast, so they don't have very bold patterns down the back. Don't get me wrong, this is a beautiful animal, but if you look at the back, you can see we have some pattern that's like trying to fight through up here, some on the sides, and you can see right down the spine. There's all kinds of different patterns that are trying to fight through, but the overall color of this southern toad is just too powerful, and it's not letting any of the pattern really show through to its full potential. And I'll show you one more normal just to give you an idea of the color variation you can get. So here's another normal, and you're gonna see basically the exact same thing. This girl is very chunky, but if we look at her back, you're gonna see the same thing. Again, we're focusing on the pattern more than like the color, because the lightning bolt gene is a pattern morph. You can see basically the same thing. You have all of this pattern along the back that's trying to come through. It's fighting the overall color on this animal, but it's not being very successful. Again, we see some pattern up near the head, but a lot of the pattern down the back, it just gets washed away. It's very muddy, and there's not much contrast as far as the pattern is concerned on the back of this female southern toad, and this represents probably about 80% of the southern toads that you're going to see in captivity if you're breeding them, or the same thing if you're getting wild-caught animals from the wild. So we just looked at some normal southern toads, so now let's look a step further. So you saw with those normals, they had a little bit of pattern on the back, but again, it's struggling. The pattern is having a hard time coming through with all the other colors. So let's look at an animal that has a much more bold pattern and is a better example of what you can get when you're breeding southern toads. So this is another big female. Hopefully we're going to get her to go this upcoming season, and as you can see, this is definitely more of a step in the right direction. So those other females that we just showed, they were nice, but again, very muddy with the pattern, very low contrast. This is kind of the opposite. This is a dark female. She's a very nice, like really chocolate look, which is awesome, but again, I'm drawing your attention to the pattern on the back, as compared to those animals where it was very, again, low contrast, very muddy, very, it's not really standing out. It's not, catching your eye. This is the opposite. So you can see we have all kinds of pattern going down the back, down the spines, even some pattern that goes into the parotoid gland. That is really cool. All along the side, these bold spots of black. And again, this is a very dark animal. If she was a lighter color, you would see this better. But Again, this is very bold, and this is certainly a step in the right direction. If you were trying to line breed southern toads to have a certain pattern, which we are here at Benjamin's Exotics, this is the kind of bloodstock you want to use. Those other females we showed you are nice, and they are in our breeding program, but stuff like this is really fantastic when it comes to the pattern, because again, you see, very bold, very pronounced, has a lot of contrast from the black to the dark chocolate color. It's not very muddy, and this is a very beautiful animal, and this is like what I want to see when I'm talking about pattern. Now, we can go ahead and look at the morph, which is the focus of today's video. So hopefully you guys have seen, we go from the normal, then you can get southern toads like this that are definitely more dramatic when it comes to the pattern. So now let's look at one of the, you do all this work, you get all these southern toads, and this is kind of the end result. This is what we're going for with this project, getting more pattern, and eventually you start getting stuff that looks like this. This is a lightning bolt southern toad. Now, as you can see, very bold pattern down the back, and the lightning bolt is a very self-explanatory name. You can see it looks like this animal, if we look at it, head on, it looks like it has two kind of cartoony, if you will, like a cartoon style lightning bolt. You can imagine if there were some clouds up here, the bolts are coming down, they're all jagged, and they both come to a point at the head, which is really cool. And another trait of the lightning bolt gene, not all these are going to have it, but generally when we look at the head as well, I don't know how well it's going to come out. Maybe I can zoom in a bit more. No, that's the max zoom for this camera. You can see you also have these stripes that go up on the eyes, some cool patterns behind the head, and this is what I'm trying to make when I'm talking about pattern. You want to refine things. The animal we just showed you is nice, and that's kind of a step in the right direction to getting that bold pattern with those spots that you can really tell. But this is kind of one of the end results of doing that, line breeding the pattern such that we can actually have amazing morphs like this with very unique traits. So this is, I'm going to say this is the best lightning bolt I have. I have other ones that are similar, but the bolt is more broken up. It's not as refined, and certainly the quality isn't as good as this female. Like you can see, she doesn't have the dark throat, so she is a female. We're going to be raising her up to see if we can get her to breed. And let's go ahead and actually talk about the genetics of this trait. So again, it's pretty straightforward. You can see what the lightning bolt trait does. It adds these two bolts on the side of the spine, but what genetic trait is actually making this animal have this pattern? As far as I can tell, and again, until we actually breed lightning bolts and start making them for the public, I can't say for sure. However, from everything that I know and all of the research I've done on genetics like this, I believe this is going to turn out to be a line-bred trait. If anyone out there knows about Pac-Man frog genetics, for example, there is a morph in ornate Pac-Man frogs. There's a couple different species of Pac-Man frogs in the market currently, but if we look at the ornates, normal ornate Pac-Man frogs, they kind of look a bit busier than the Cranwell's Pac-Man frogs, but in that species, so in the ornates, you have a morph that is called the dragonwing ornate. And the dragonwing ornate is a very similar gene to the lightning bolt. Obviously, ornate Pac-Man frogs are a completely different species, and they're not even closely related to southern toads, but I believe that whatever genetic trait is making the dragonwing ornate have that kind of dragonwing pattern down the back, a similar gene is making the southern toad go from having this bold pattern with all these big spots on the back to having these dual lightning bolt type patterns going down the spine. And in ornate Pac-Man frogs, that is a line-bred trait, meaning that over generations, you select the ornates that have the best dragonwing patterns, and generation after generation, you get not only better quality dragonwing ornates, but you also get more. The percentage of offspring that have that trait goes up with successive generations. So I believe that's what this is going to turn out to be, a line-bred trait. I don't think it's a recessive. I I don't think there's any chance that this is a codominant, because as of now we don't know of any codominant or incomplete dominant morphs in any of the North American toads. All the morphs are either line-bred or recessive. So recessive would be like albino, melanistic, piebald, leucistic. These are all genes that exist in southern toads, and we know the albinos are recessive, we know the melanistics are recessive. We assume the piebald and leucistic animals are also going to be recessive for the ones that actually prove out. There's a couple people working on breeding those right now, but this is a trait that I do believe is going to be line bred. And thankfully I do have quite a few of these guys. I don't have, you know, this is the only one that looks this good, but I have about a dozen or so animals that are, I would assume, very closely related to this animal. They were collected literally like within 200 feet of where this animal was found. I have a large group, relatively large, of about a dozen of these guys, and a lot of them have not, like I said, they're not complete like this. They don't have a complete bolt on either side. Some of them have some breaks in the lightning bolt, and sometimes there is some of the pattern is thrown more into the sides. But the other animals that I believe are closely related to this animal have similar traits, and I personally believe that when we start to breed those guys, even though they don't look like lightning bolts, they're going to have the genetic potential to make lightning bolts in captivity. So this is going to be a longer project. We're talking at least 3 to 4 years before there could even be a chance of these guys, you know, lightning bolts coming into the market. But it is a project that I'm working very hard on here at Benjamin's Exotics. We're going to try to spawn some southern toads this upcoming spring and summer. I have probably 50 or 60 breeding adults, well, a little bit less than that. That's all the animals that we have breeding, but let's say 40 or 50 breeding adults. They're going to be brumating, and hopefully we can get some of these animals, these kind of lightning bolt type southern toads, to spawn so we can actually get these guys out to the market for you, so you guys can enjoy these as pets, or if you want to do your own breeding projects yourself. So I hope that you guys did enjoy today's video. Hopefully this kind of gives you some more insight into the genetics behind southern toads and some of the breeding projects that we are working on with southern toads here at Benjamin's Exotics. I think these guys are a highly underrated species, and just the morphs, the genetic variation that you see in these guys, you're not seeing it in American toads, and you're not seeing it in, you know, other species like woodhouse toads. I think the southern toads really have a lot of breeding potential going forward, and it is a species that we're going to be working very hard to bring front and center over the next couple years. If you guys want to see more videos like this in the future, be sure to give this video a like, be sure to leave a comment down below, and of course subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching today's video, and I will see you guys in the next video.